Hello and welcome to episode 9 of my Kerbal Space Program NASA series. This is it, finally, for the first time in this game playthrough's history, a Kerbal will set foot on the moon. I've trimmed out a lot of the extraneous maneuvers that were shown in the Apollo 10 video just because you've seen them once before. But this is, we're doing it for real. Going to get these guys on the moon, do lots of science, and once you get to where you're doing moon and min-miss landings, which again I'm purposefully handicapping myself. If you just build a vessel to the absolute best of your ability with the parts available at the beginning of the game, you can get into Mooner and min-miss missions way earlier than I have. I've just been goofing off and trying to keep things somewhat real-ish. But this, once in my normal playthrough style, once I start hitting this stage of the game, it's really off to the races. Because science unlocks come pretty thick and fast, and I can start building pretty much anything I want. And it starts getting a lot more exciting. Just getting the Lunar Lander retrieval taken care of here. I've already launched it onto the intercept course with the moon. I've just trimmed all that out once again because it's boring transfer burn, skip the launch and all that junk. The trajectory I've set that booster on, the transfer stage, it will crash into the moon instead of flinging out into the solar system. Which, speaking of the solar system, last night I was able to finally jury-rig my equatorial mount for my telescope back together. And it's been probably 4 or 5 years since I was able to get that thing out. But got to do a lot of fun observations last night. I had to aim it again, the viewfinder, which if you're ever trying to center in your telescope, what I ended up doing was there's a cell tower that's about a mile away from my house, and the way I did it is I got the top of the cell tower in the center of my main view, and then sort of tweaked my finder scope onto it. Later in the night, once the moon came out and was brighter, it's further away and a smaller target. I got the moon in the main view, which was a lot easier because the finder scope was at least accurate enough to get me in the neighborhood of the moon. And then I dialed in my finder scope a little more. From there, I was able to get myself in the neighborhood and use Mars as my aiming point, which I was still using a wide-angle eyepiece, so it made it a lot easier. Once I go to my more narrow-angle eyepieces, I'm going to have to do some more adjusting. But long story short, Mars is, once you get to where you can accurately find Mars using your finder scope, that's about, for just casual observation, that's about as close as you really need to get. I was able to very quickly acquire Saturn, and we're living kind of in the city. There are some places out in the country, like family members' homes, that we can go to that have much better viewing conditions. But even kind of in the city, I was able to observe Spica and Altair, which are some of the brightest stars in the sky, so it's really not that surprising I was able to find them. But just that little off-topic rant, I was just really excited. I've got an old Zoomel 114 Eclipse telescope. It's got a really nice equatorial mount with motor drive for tracking. But it was just kind of neat to get it out there and do some of that stuff again for the first time in a long time. I really haven't had time to mess with it since we got into the new house 3 years ago. It's just been craziness with new jobs and all sorts of fun things. Here the lander's just skimming across the surface of the moon, headed towards the periaps. And when you're going for a moon landing, this is the most efficient way to do it. Set your periaps low, not too low. You don't want to smack into a mountain or a hill. But I usually find 5,000 to be safe. There are certain areas on the moon where that can get you into trouble geographically because certain orbital paths will carry you straight into a mountain. And once you get near your periaps, you start to burn off your lateral velocity, as I'm doing here. Or rather, as Jebediah is doing here. Usually takes a pretty generous burn, depending on what engine you're using. I'm using the Atlas low-profile engine from the KW pack. This is not my final lander design that I like to use the most. The video I made where it's set to the Blue Danube, I have my two-stage lander that I prefer to use, but that was a sandbox video. I really would like to use that big KW rocket in my career playthrough, but it just takes so long to unlock all those things that it's just, once I get to the point where I can build it, I usually have no need because I'm on to more advanced, more modern-day technology level type transfer vehicles. Because the Saturn V that I can build out of that is pretty much obsolete by the time I can finally use it, funnily enough. I would love to make my own tech tree, because when you look at it honestly, the fact that we don't build Saturn V's anymore isn't necessarily because we can't, it's just we don't really have the need for it in real life. And so I really wish some of those super massive, inefficient launchers in the KW pack would get shifted a little earlier in the tech tree. But I would have to kind of configure my own custom tech tree to do that, and I do not have the patience for that at this moment. And if I start rearranging my tech tree too much, then I'm just basically giving myself all the parts I want at different sizes. It's a momentous occasion in Kerbal history as Jebediah steps out onto the ladder. Which I should probably aim that camera a little better. It doesn't really show them stepping off the ladder, but it's kind of hard to correctly aim it. But I was determined to get this entire moment captured from the onboard camera. As Jebediah steps out and plants the first flag on the surface of the moon. It's my nice, very original mission name. And once again, a totally not plagiarized plaque inscription. Which I've always loved reading some of Neil Armstrong's, the few things Neil would actually say, because Neil was kind of a private guy, which is probably why he had so much admiration, is he wasn't really what the stereotype of the astronaut was at the time, and neither was Buzz Aldrin. And one of the things that always reflected well on Neil, in my opinion, was everyone would ask him what it was like to go to the moon, or people would ask Buzz what it was like to go to the moon with Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong once said, and this had to do with Buzz's contributions during the Gemini program, I don't think enough people really give Buzz enough credit for his contribution, because we tend to focus more on who was flying the mission, on the pilot, because that's a real, hot, sexy job to be doing. And Neil Armstrong was, without a doubt, one of the finest pilots NASA has ever seen. That is why he went to the moon. That horrific video of him flying the flying bedstead lunar lander prototype, where they've calculated it down, and if he had pulled the ejection handle just fractions of a second later, he wouldn't have survived that. But his determination to try and save it, and that he stabilized it as well as he did, is what got him picked for and not to mention his rescuing of his Gemini mission, which very well could have ended up with him and his fellow astronaut killed. But Buzz Aldrin, as a recreational diver, he kind of understood what it was like to work in those type of situations, because the very first Gemini EVA missions, they found out the suits would balloon up, and it was a lot of exertion just to accomplish very basic tasks. And Buzz Aldrin, who his his main contribution to the space program was his PhD thesis he wrote while he was trying to become an astronaut, and it basically wrote the ground rules for orbital rendezvous. His PhD thesis on orbital rendezvous is the basis of pretty much our entire space program. The Soviets obviously had their own person who figured that out, and it pains me to say I'm not familiar with who that is. I would really be talking out of my butt if I took a stab at it, because I'm only really familiar with Gagarin and Kamarov and a couple other Soviet cosmonauts. But Buzz took it upon himself, after the failure of some of the early Gemini EVAs to accomplish the goals they set out. He started the neutral buoyancy testing regime and was able to figure out how a person has to plant their body in order to work in space, and all these seemingly mundane things, but without somebody going through the effort to actually develop the techniques to do so, the entire program would have been dead on arrival. Which, because of all these contributions, finally winding my way back to the beginning of this little spiel, is what Neil Armstrong said many times was that Buzz Aldrin did not go to the moon with me. I went to the moon with Buzz Aldrin. Which was... I have met Buzz Aldrin, and to my everlasting shame, I was far too shy and intimidated to get him to sign a copy of a spaceflight book that he wrote the foreword to, which I've met. Growing up, my heroes have been Robert D. Ballard, the man who found the Titanic and the Bismarck wreck. Also discovered deep sea smoker vents and the extremophile life that exists around in conditions that people thought were impossible to survive. At 8 years old, I was blessed enough to be given the opportunity to meet him, and there was no hesitation on my part. I was able to talk to him without any type of... it was just effortless. However, the time I met Buzz Aldrin, I was 20... It was just a couple years ago when the Tulsa Air and Space Museum was trying to make a bid on one of the space shuttles before their retirement, and he came to help promote, and he came to help promote the effort at a local air show, and I was standing 10 feet away and couldn't work up the nerve to go up and do more than say, your typical starstruck celebrity meeting. Hi, I'm a huge fan. One of my favorite books of all time is The Martian by Stephen Weir, and in one section the character is trying to psych him up for a very dangerous task, and he asks himself, he goes, well, all I have to do is ask myself what an Apollo astronaut would do. Well, he'd drink 3 whiskey sours and drive his Corvette down to the launch pad and fly to the moon in a capsule 1/3 the size of my rover. But I've set the lander on a collision course with the moon. I keep the periaps from going below 0 because if you do that, it won't actually read your returning vehicle as having been in orbit. It'll be as either a flyby or suborbital, I think. I can't exactly remember. And because the bodies in Kerbal Space Program don't have mass concentrations, their gravity wells are all perfectly smooth. Even my lander would have stayed in orbit perpetually. So that was just a little disposal technique. Editing out all the boring return stuff. I don't know what I was thinking on this return because I just about clocked the capsule with the service module. Watch it disappear over the horizon. And I messed up, made it a nighttime return, so there's really not a whole lot to see. Skip all this stuff. And after this, I ended up unlocking the seismic sensor to build this little probe. Because of the incidents of RAM crashes I've had lately, I went ahead and just deleted Interstellar because all I was using it for was for the impact sensor experiment. And I was able to get science and perform that experiment with this probe, but the crashes and other instability I was getting, because I'm pretty close to my RAM limit, to the 3 gig limit imposed on a 32-bit program, even though I've got a 64-bit processor and operating system. But this is just a fun little dinky probe I built carrying a seismic sensor. It was a very boring launch, so I just thought I'd skip to the landing so everyone could see what it looked like. And in a few seconds, you'll see what I'm hiding in here as a long-duration spacecraft, which is basically just a fancy way of saying I needed a way of putting Jeb, Bob, and Bill into a safe place that's not the astronaut pool, because the game has a funny habit of assuming they want to fly everything and trying to throw them in the cockpit if you're not really diligent on your crew assignments. A nice view of an inside of a fairing, which is probably not a view most people get much of. I'm just going to stay in a low orbit. I've packed a lot of life support in this so they can stay up for quite a while. It just got difficult trying to manually manage everything, especially if I had to make some quick adjustments or changes to a vessel. But yes, we have a Kerbal Soyuz pod, constructed from mostly stock parts and a Kerbal Habitat Pack round command module with a shielded clampetron on the front. Not too shabby looking, if you ask me, which nobody did. Looks much better in sunlight. I'm actually going to plan, once I get into, say, the International Space Station, because of the Soyuz's just unprecedented longevity as a spacecraft, I'm going to have one of these attached as a lifeboat on my space station. I don't know if I'm going to build Mir. I was always a big fan of Mir when I was a kid. Some of those photographs of the shuttle docked to Mir had a real impact on my underdeveloped psyche. And it's not going to be as a return vehicle strictly. I can bring 3 Kerbals back and hold 2 in the forward section. It's just going to be get away from a space station if something's going catastrophically wrong, because that round command module will not survive re-entry. But it'll have enough longevity on it that if anyone has to get out in a hurry, we can definitely accommodate them until a rescue mission can rendezvous with it and transfer our 2 extra passengers home. Which is probably the usefulness successful and And here we see Shepney and Verily Kerman of the Apollo 12 mission threading the needle on this canyon. I saw it from a distance and I was fairly certain I was going to crash, but I thought it would look freaking awesome if I threaded that needle perfectly. So I decided just to roll with it. I didn't even make any adjustment burns. But it was a little harrowing there for a second. But all's well that ends well. They blasted through safely. Made a very safe bouncy touchdown. Which these cargo boxes, these Kerbal attachment cargo boxes I've attached to the lander, they added a little bit of mass, but didn't have as detrimental effect on the efficiency of the ship as I was fearing. So... And they eventually get removed from the vessel, so they're not a concern at all while returning. But the whole point of this was to give my Kerbals a mission and a little project to do. And this is again using the Interstellar Pack impact experiment, which has since been abandoned. I can't wait for 0.24 once we get into a 64-bit environment. There's still going to be a limit to how many mods you can run, just because your load times will be absolutely atrocious if it's got to load every texture ever created for this game. So it's going to be a lot of the basic functionality you can extend through mods, but you're still not going to be able to go absolutely crazy. Because a funny thing happened on the way back home, I'm going to hand it over to live broadcast me for the rendezvous operation. Well, I said I figured out the two-handed approach. There we go. Get this axis stabilized first. Oh, too far. Oh no! And that was it for the monopropellant. That's alright. We'll let Billy Bobdus prove his mettle. Complete the docking maneuver for them. That's kind of a nice thing about flying things Apollo style. There is literally no reason to do it in KSP normally, because everything's so small mass-wise, and most of the engines are so efficient. But it does give you a little redundancy. But you're putting redundancy in to compensate for the extra things you're going to burn in order to do Apollo, so I guess it's really not all that efficient. I guess I'll just stop talking. I think it looks cool, and I'm going to stick with that. Okay, after one RAM crash too many, we have reverted back to Better Atmospheres version 5. I'm going to see if they have an update, because I've noticed that my frame rates in atmospheric launches, taking off from Kerbin, are just absolutely terrible. They may have an update by now, I just haven't gone to look for it. I wanted to get this flight finished. But yeah, we're back to an earlier version of Better Atmospheres. So I got better performance, but everything's going to look, yeah, like it used to. I'm hoping to switch back to version 5, because I really liked it, although, to be totally honest, version 4, which this is, definitely has a more realistic look to it. But I think version 5 is just a little prettier, and it's taken the haze off the moon, which I really appreciate. It was kind of distracting. The moon looks loads better in version 5. Come on, let's hit that thicker atmosphere. There we go. We'll induce the Spin-O-Doom. And break those loose. With the end of the Soyuz test flight, we're going to bring these guys home and start progressing off to bigger and better things now that the Apollo program is well underway. Thank you for watching.